I am now standing up here with Dr. Julialynne Walker and Yolanda Owens. They are going to be talking a little bit more in depth about community agriculture, sustainability, and foraging. Dr. Julialynne Walker has a real short description. Manager of the Bronzeville Growers Market, full stop. That's it. I have to write a lot down for Yolanda here. First off, she's a homegrown Buckeye from the South Side Columbus City Schools. And now, hold on. First black president of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences Alumni Society. Had to write it down, or you can just say CFAES. CFAES. You two, thank you so much for coming here today. You have a lot of time and a lot of content to go over in that time, so I'm going to leave the two of you to it, and we'll catch up in a little bit.
All right, great. Thanks. Thanks so much. That's funny. That introduction is funny, mainly just because Dr. Walker is so much more than that, but I know that you're the kind of person that allows your work to speak for you as opposed for your titles, I think. It definitely speaks for you. I figure I'd share a little bit about kind of my journey and around what connected me with food. So, like you said, I grew up here in Columbus, growing up on the south side of Columbus, and that's not necessarily a space where you would imagine that a person would be in the space of agriculture or growing their own food. But for me, I was blessed. My father's family actually has farmland. Oh, that's a cool ringtone. My father's family actually had farmland in North Carolina, where he was from, that was given to him by their slave owner family, to be really candid. And with that and passing that down, having really deep roots and surprisingly still connected to agriculture despite the trauma of slavery in that space. And having a lot of that family, my dad was able to bring that home where we had a garden in our backyard. And my mother, who has always been very much a very strong-willed activist type person, she's first-generation American. Her family came from Panama, and just with that being her mindset and who she was, I remember growing up, we would get food in boxes once a week from a black-owned co-op in Columbus. And I remember being little and actually low-key being embarrassed of getting my groceries in a box because all of my friends went to Kroger, and at that time was Big Bear was the grocery store.
That's right.
And I'm like, why can't we go to the grocery store and get our food? But instead we would go and pick up our co-op box. And rest in peace, Nomo X, he was the person who managed that co-op where we would get our food over at the bookstore on Livingston Avenue. And just having those really deep connections with food and where it came from, and creating a space of people that looked like me and my family was something that had always stayed with me. And then I was able to connect even more so with, through a group called Rites of Passage with my Auntie Malika. And I remember after multiple trips with her to Ghana and visiting farms there, I had this realization of this really dysfunctional system of these folks having this abundant resources, but not having the ability to be able to purchase the end product. Mm-hmm. And so for me, being able to create the connection or to fix this brokenness was so important to me. And so that's when I went studying at OSU, trying to get into the space of understanding agriculture and communications, and social and economic development. And what I thought I was going to do, I thought I was going to save the world. Like, I was going to work at like Windrock International or work at Heifer International, one of those places. And I was going to work in like Sub-Saharan Africa or South America, and creating micro enterprises for people so that they can be self-sustaining in the space of agriculture, and using sustainable agriculture to do that. And I remember coming out of college was when I got my first like real job was at Godman Guild. And their garden had been around maybe for 2 years, I think, but working at the community garden at Godman Guild. Also want to give a shout out to Trish Clark and to Jessica Roach and to Michelle Frias, because those are people who sustained and worked that garden. Because it no longer exists now, but working there. And when I got there and working in the Wyland Park area was when it clicked for me, and I realized, how can I go out and save the world if there are issues in the connection of where our food comes from in agriculture in my own community, coming from Columbus, and that brokenness. And that's when I was like, I have to, my time is better spent working here. And so within that, I mean, I've been blessed to work with a ton of nonprofits, but for me, COVID gave this amazing space that I have to say I had the privilege, because it is a privilege to be able to during COVID, to take time to look inward and to figure out where my time is best spent, because a lot of people didn't have that during COVID. Most people did not have that ability, and that was when I started Forage in Black. And figuring out what does it look like to spark the conversation of reconnection for Black people, for Indigenous people, for people of color, create that reconnection, because there's so much trauma there between slavery, between migrant workers and unfair wages and all of these things. There's so much trauma in the connection to our land and the work that we do, in the work that they do. What can I do to be able to spark that conversation, to bring that top of mind to anybody? And I was like, well, we wear clothes. And so, I started coming up with these concepts of being able to spark those conversations through clothing. And I remember I literally was in the shower as I was preparing to do the King Lincoln Bronzeville TED Talk last year. And I started thinking, and this is where I actually came up with the shirt I have on today. No justice.
So sorry, I forgot to ask about it.
No, it's all good. No justice, no peace, no farmer, no feast. And so things like that, where I'm able to spark the conversation for folks to just to initiate that thought. Because even if they initiate that thought, I mean, you have to think about food at least 3 times a day, right? Because you're hungry and you need to eat. And that's the connection that we all have. And so if you can revert back to that when you're putting that food in your mouth and thinking of where your food comes from, or how it is procured, or how it got, how the people are treated who are picking that food, whatever that looks like for you, at least sparking that conversation to actually give a damn, right? That was for me the start of Forage in Black, and putting that out there in that way. And I was really happy to be able to connect through some amazing people within the College of Agriculture at OSU that I work with, and being in the space of being a woman of color, being a woman, being in the space of agriculture during a time where there's a focus and a shift on sustainability, and there's this new awakening around racial equality, right? And so being all of these things at this time has been really pivotal and really interesting. And so they've pushed me into a lot of spaces. And for me, it helped me to be unapologetic about being in those spaces and making sure that our voices are heard. But sometimes I don't even have to say anything, because I walk in and I wear my shirt, or I wear my earrings, my kale earrings, or whatever it is. But for me, that was like the conversation starter to get them to think about what it looks like, and how a farmer, if you looked harder, is not necessarily that 66-year-old white man.
So I have to jump in, of
yes,
course, and
ma'am.
say, what are some of your other messages then? And then how do you decide what to put on a shirt? How do you decide on a message?
So for me, Forage in Black is this space of Black culture and green thumbs, and the connection between the two. And so for me, it was also thinking of concepts that we might use or say, and statements that we might say, and creating those connections in that way. So other than this one, because I was thinking about that too, and I was like, for example, I have a reusable shopping bags that I have, and it says doing it for the culture, or for the agri-culture. Because often we talk about our culture, how often it's co-opted, and Everybody wants to BS until it's time to BS, right? And so that's, for me, when you see that, and often we think of, what am I doing this for? I'm doing it for the culture. But it's also, I'm doing this for the agriculture, because that is part of our culture. Like that is why we were sought out to be enslaved, because we had this rich, amazing ability to be able to grow a wide array of foods. So it's not surprising when I see amazing, like the docuseries High on the Hog and all of these things that are showing these deep-rooted connections. It's not by happenstance. This is who we are, and this is what we do, and wanting to reconnect with that, and not thinking of it as this slave work, but thinking of it that was why we were enslaved. And I think that's another shift that I've been trying to do a lot of work on too. And I know you are as well.
Right.
Yeah, and I want you to share a little bit more on that connection too, of that mind shift of this is not slave work, but work that we've been masters of for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to shift?
Yes. No, I want you to shift. Yeah.
Okay. No problem, because it's a dialogue, and we connect, and we have so much to share. And thinking about today, and there are always so many ways in which you can share. And I thought perhaps the best way to do it would be to share with you my typical Saturday. So what did I do today? And it literally is very representative of what I do most Saturdays. And Saturday morning today started with me going to Bethany Presbyterian Church. It's the only African-American Presbyterian church in Columbus, and it's a church that was co-founded by my maternal grandmother and great aunts. And it was founded because they were attending Broad Street Presbyterian Church, and they were instructed to go and worship from the galley upstairs. And they were also not allowed to partake in communion. And so they began meeting, they had prayer meetings at Ogden Temple, there at the corner of Garfield and Long, until they could raise sufficient funds to purchase the land further down the street on Garfield that became Bethany Presbyterian Church. And so it is the church remains a family commitment. And I go on Saturday mornings to open the church for John. And I can't share much else about John, because he is a person who is without a home, and yet has felt a connection to the lunch program at the church. And the lunch program is now 15 years old, and John began attending maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But for the first 3 years, he literally never said a word. He came in, got his food, and left. And then finally he began opening up. He shared his name, and then after a year or two, he always had his bags with him. And then for some reason the conversation began extended, and John now comes at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. Well, he's there wherever he sleeps. He comes to the church. And then he now assists in cleaning the church in preparation for the lunch. So while I'm doing the prep, or the final prep for meals that may have been prepared by others, or I'll start the prep. So while I'm working on the food, John is cleaning the lunchroom and getting everything ready physically. And we do that from 7 to 9 roughly every Saturday morning. Then a new team comes in at 9, and then I now switch to my garden work. So today between 8:30 and 9, I was interacting with different people. One who was coming to bring some compost material. So I have different people, scouring their environments or maintaining their scraps for me. So bring us compost. So I have a growing pile for the community garden. And then others who were going to work on a different project. So from 8:30 to 9, I'm managing this, and the new team is coming in, and there's a transition period. Now I switch to the latest community garden, which is down the street on Garfield, where we're constructing raised beds. And so now I've got a different crew of people who are volunteers from the community, and this is supposed to be the final stage of building this bed, and that's happening in the garage of a neighbor 2 houses down, because that was the only place we could find to store the material. And then on the other side, we have a neighbor who has become a bug, and I'll talk about bugs in a minute, and she helps me prepare 2 of the raised beds as herb gardens. So while we've got in one group doing the construction work, we're doing the herb bed and getting that ready. Meanwhile, the construction group calls me, oh, we ran out of this, we need a run to Lowe's, so let me run to Lowe's and get the next level of supplies, come back, and oh, we're hungry, no problem, let me go back to the church, get lunch for you. Meanwhile, I've got another team at the community event that's being organized by another group, and they've got an activity at Poindexter, the Legacy Point, and then at Sawyer Trevett. And so I run by Sawyer Trevett to make sure that they have enough hot cards, and we give some candies and stuff to pass out. And they're like, okay, fine. I'm like, well, this is winding down. Why don't you move over to Legacy? They're like, cool, we'll shift to Legacy. But in the meantime, I've got to go around and talk to the other vendors to make sure, I know what everybody's doing or who the new people are. And this is all before noon.
That's a lot.
This is all pre-noon. And now I come back, make sure everybody is closing out. You've got this, they've got that. Everybody is cool. Everybody's been fed. The food that's left over has a place to go. And now I transition to ComFest and talking about growing community around agriculture.
Wow.
But my focus, and it says in the introduction, yes, manager of the Bronzeville Growers Market. But what I want to share with you is that we have very similar backgrounds. I'm 3rd generation Columbus. My grandparents all were involved in agriculture. Even, the backyard, very extended. And then hunting, the possum and the coon and, the deer.
Yes.
And and then whatever they didn't grow, if we wanted more, they were involved in canning. And then we had Central Market, where the bus station is now. And we would go down to the Central Market and get bushel baskets of food. And we knew that for August, we had canning and school started. They ran together. Mm-hmm. And then after the canning, we had the baking for Christmas. So we started making the fruit cakes, and then after the fruit cakes, the cookies that were best eaten when they were seasoned, which meant that they had some alcohol up in there. So we were in tune with the cycles of nature. Mm-hmm. Growing up in the 50s in Columbus and in part Chicago, we were attuned because the people around us were still in tune. But I find more and more that I am perhaps that bridge between the retention of knowledge and the loss of knowledge. And so a lot of what we're doing today is to say, how do we build pathways so that the knowledge is not lost, so people understand both the trauma and the value or the benefit. And so, yes, we start with the Bronzeville Agri Academy. And for me, that is a general way, a very non-threatening way for people to access knowledge. And so it has been a 10-week online course. It was supposed to be in person last year with OSU, and then, we know COVID-19, everything went to Zoom, and we're like, Zoom, what's a Zoom? But we're now experts. And so, but it is available for people to come on and listen for one night or listen for all 10 nights. It doesn't matter. When we did the class in fall of last year, because the restrictions were lifted a bit, we also had on-site visits where people could actually go to a farm. Because what I found was that there are a lot of gaps, and so I, as one individual, can't answer all the questions. Mm-hmm. I don't have the energy, the time, or even the access to people. And so I then thought, well, we have to be able to find other people with similar knowledge or some knowledge who can help support each other. So I moved to developing the Bronzeville Urban Growers, or BUGs. And so these are people who primarily live in Bronzeville. There are 3 people who are they work in Bronzeville, but they live elsewhere, but because they work in the area, I thought it important to include them. But we want to create a corridor of healthy living. We want to create in Bronzeville, which for other reasons, and we can go into that in a bit, has been regarded, it represents so many health challenges because of the lack of access to, inexpensive fresh produce. We said, all right, how do we encourage people to take this knowledge from the virtual course and implement it for themselves and their families? So we have individuals, we have families with children, we have retired couples, we have all kinds. And basically what we did was we got funding and we provided a garden in a box.
I love it.
Because people said, they got bugs, they got worms, I can't put my hands in the earth. I'm like, well, why are you interested in gardening? You can't put my ground is too rocky, or I can't, or it's this, or it's that. Oh, I live in a rental, I can't dig up because my landlord will. I said, I'm always thinking, what is the objection in someone's head? What are they concerned about? So we prepackaged and we said, we will give you containers in which you can garden. We will give you the soil. We will give you the seeds. We will give you the starter plants, and then we will monitor. And then we will encourage those who live on your block to also work with you. And so together, we'll learn and deepen knowledge as a whole. So now we have 3 or 4 streets where we've got 2 or 3 bug families. And we encourage them, walk down the street and ask them what they did. Don't be texting me. People text me a picture and say, what's wrong with my plant? I don't know. Walk down the street and ask the other bug. Ask them if they're growing the same thing because we gave them tomato plants. Yeah. So go ask them. But it helps to build community around agriculture. It helps to build community sustainability around agriculture. Yeah. And then we said, okay, COVID, everybody's talking about side hustles. Actually, in 2018, I said, we need a farmer's market. I really enjoy farmer's markets. Everywhere I've been, I always, go to a market. And when I say everywhere, I've been everywhere. And so I said, well, why don't we have a farmer's market? And we begin to get into some of the policy considerations because if you may remember, this was the year that the Kroger's on Cleveland closed. Oh, gosh, yeah. And there was a big brouhaha. The community was like, there's no food. Why, what happened? How come? And the city stepped up and said, they were negotiating with Kroger's, and Kroger said, forget it, we're out of here. And they were trying to figure out some other options, and somebody said, well, let's put a farmer's market in Linden. And the city said, okay, let's find some money, and they put money up to put a farmer's market in Linden. Well, I approached the same folk, and I said, well, hey, we're over here in Brownsville. We don't have a farmer's market. We have the same, and we've been without a store longer than, because the closest full-service grocery store to 17th and Mount Vernon, where we're located, is Hills Market. Wow. Hills Market? Hills Market.
That's not obtainable for most of the folks.
It is clearly not affordable. From there, we went to Save-A-Lot. And we've plotted all this out. Yeah. We went to Save-A-Lot on Main Street. Well, Save-A-Lot closed a year ago because it wasn't serving healthy food. It wasn't serving nutritious food. So, really, it was half the time it was rotten. I really hated going in there because it smelled so. And then Turkey Hill stepped up and began, it's interesting how the corporate interests respond. But the closest full-service, affordable grocery store really is Kroger's, and it's 2.1 miles away. at Nelson and Main.
Main Street, yeah.
Yeah. So we said we should have a farmer's market as well. And I was told by the city and various people within the, and they know because I've said this to them in different ways. I mean, this way I've said it directly as well as, but they literally looked at me and said, Julialynne, go sit down. This is not your time. This is not the time for Bronzeville. We're focused on Linden. If you're interested in being at a farmer's market, bring your people up to Linden. And then we'll get back to you. So I called my people and I said, if it's me and 2 tomatoes, it's me and 2 tomatoes. But I will be at the corner of 17th and Mount Vernon starting, and I will be there until. And that was 2018. We've been there until. The Linden Market did not go last year. I don't know if it's going to go this year.
I don't know.
But we have been continuously, since the day we opened, we have met when we said we were going to meet. Because we think it's important to be able to provide fresh, affordable, nutritious produce to our community.
Can I?
There's so many questions,
right?
I can tell they're racing around in your head.
But mainly because I've watched, I honestly had no idea that it was not supported in any way outside of you saying, this is what I'm going to do for my community, and then the community and people stepping up because they believe in that as well. So, yeah. Yeah,
so when we say grassroots, this is really grassroots.
Right.
And so when and I say that it's an urban farm stand because I don't want to claim, if I say farmers market, people have a certain visual. And I say it's an urban farm stand. And I really encourage people, to come out. And it was very interesting last year because I almost didn't open. And people came to me and said, no, you must open, literally. You must. You can't because there were so many restrictions. Yeah. The state of Ohio said agriculture is protected. You can function, but under certain conditions. And I was concerned as to whether or not this would actually work. And people said, no, we will make it work. And last year, under COVID, it literally was the best season we had so far. And it was because people saw us as a base. We were providing food, but we were also providing a safe, emotional place. We had a woman who came and literally, she brought her things and she had some knitting and she had some pictures and some books and she just came and sat down and spent the 3 hours, with us in the environment. When I talk about the bugs, and I just wanted to share because we forget what these kinds of experiences can mean to people. During COVID, and there were various youth had different ways of appreciating the educational experience being provided to them. And I want to share with you that, for instance, these are just some snapshots of the people who participated in the Bronzeville Agri Academy, in the market, and in the for bugs. And I always say that my star pupil is 7 years old. I think he's 8 years old now. But my star pupil last year was 7 years old. And this is a young man who was having some challenges connecting to his regular school experience, but he never missed an Agri Academy class. And he would go to his parents a half hour ahead, Miss Julialynne's on tonight. Who's going to connect me? Come on. And he monitored, and he had questions. And he would put in the chat a question, or he would raise his hand for a question. And he would come to the farmer's market and share things or buy things. All right? So that's a 7-year-old. I also had a woman who was asked by her church to start a community garden. And she was saying, I don't mind doing it, but I really don't know, and I don't feel that there's enough support within the church to do it. But by attending the class and meeting other people in the class, she really got excited. And then I went up a couple of times and helped to advise on the process. So she's now doing a community garden there. We had a woman who has been growing flowers, but she was, growing some food, but she was like, well, but why? I'm just by myself. But now she started growing food, but we had her as one of the site visits. And so she was able to show off the work that she had done, and was really, because people were appreciative, it helped to make a difference to her. And so, and I wouldn't have known that any one of them would be the ones to actually participate in our process, but they were. But I want to move, say that having done that, and looking at some of that, I want to move briefly and then see if there are some other questions. Okay. And I started with our 7-year-old because I just want to say briefly, is that as we continue our work, and I really want to, I think I speak for all of us, we're doing it for today, but we're also very conscious of the future.
Absolutely.
And really trying to say, how do we actually begin to ensure that the youth of our community understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and be a bridge. So we can do that with individuals, through our work. We can do it through institutions where the children are. And we can do it through policy changes. One of the things, and it just continues to, dumbfound me, but, and I'll, come up with the actual figure later, but it is a known fact that currently there is more lawn, there is more grass being grown in front and backyards than there is farmland in the United States.
Wow.
There is more lawn than farmland in the entire United States. It's time to change that.
Yes.
And we'll start with the lawns. Okay? So, I don't know, questions, comments, or maybe we have some questions from the audience.
Yeah. No, I was, when you were talking about starting with the kids, absolutely. I mean, for myself as a mom, we have a garden on the side of our house, but even in the garden that I was able to start with my community members in Pickerington, because we started a community garden, even out there, that was our focus, was to be able to create a communal space. It's not, I don't know if it's popular opinion or not, it doesn't matter to me, but I personally believe that community gardens are amazing communal spaces. They are great educational spaces. They will not save us from food insecurity, but that is the point of them. The point of them is this communal space, and especially for education, but engaging our youth and creating those spaces. I know that I had, actually my, one of the science teachers from my high school reached out to me and was telling me that there was supposed to be a pilot program within Columbus City schools. Unfortunately, because of COVID and everything going virtual, they weren't able to do it. My hopes is that they didn't let that stifle that plan to be able to integrate this connection of agriculture into the space of the STEM classroom experience. To reconnect those students to food and where their food comes from, and how that whole process works. So, I mean, even when I look at some of the stuff that my daughter was working on, and she's, learning very simple science around, what is it called? The food web. They don't even, it surprised me that people were not part of that.
Wow.
Right, and so even as simplistic as that, and integrating ourselves back into that space, as if we're not, autonomous from it. Even something as simple as that, I feel like can make a big difference in our connection to that space, for sure.
I think part of my discussion is how do we ensure that people know what options they have? And so Alexis and her presence is very important in terms of alerting people actually to their environment. Yeah. And just to recognize that, yes, that is edible food. It doesn't have to be grown by somebody. it comes from the earth because that's where all food comes from, the earth.
That part, yes.
You know, and so then it's just real basic.
Yeah.
And so for me, part of the policy discussion then becomes, how do we include food as part of the urban landscape that is public? How do we change public parks so that they actually have a food dimension?
Yeah.
And there are certain cities that are doing that.
Right, Atlanta has that food forest.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely amazing. Me and my husband went down there a couple of months ago on a trip, and it was funny because he was like, "You want to go to the food forest?" And I'm like, "You know, I want to go to the food forest. I don't know why you ask me silly questions." But I made him drive me over there so that we could walk through and so that we can see what it could look like, what this could be like, to be able to have this space that's available to everyone, because it should
And so
be.
that's what we should do with some of the land bank property. So some of them, yes, we have community gardens, but also, there are different organizations actually have them be responsible for the maintenance of a food forest, because that's one of the things they say, okay, well, who's going to be in charge? Who's going to make sure that it's kept clean, or we don't want it to be a mess? Well, actually, nature is messy.
Yeah, it is.
And
It is.
and it's
It is a little bit.
okay. It doesn't have to be pristine with every blade cut. That's the suburban lawn issue.
Yeah.
No, nature is messy, and part of that is the value. When the leaves fall and they decompose, that's adding
That's
value
value,
to
absolutely.
the earth. So it's okay. So we want people to do that, but it's expanding the range of options. Just encourage people. Now, what Columbus has done recently, and not everybody, will be able to avail themselves of this, but it's possible, is they have now agreed that people can sell from their front yards. So the Columbus City Council has said that if, first of all, it is acknowledging that agriculture can be a business from one's home, just as childcare or being a lawyer or being whatever else, okay? But of course there are restrictions. You can't, put a big sign up. You can't put a store up, that kind of, but you can sell produce from your backyard in your front yard. So it begins to legitimate agriculture as a side hustle, which is okay. It's a way of opening the door. But when you mentioned earlier about the information that your daughter experienced in school, we need more discussion showing that regardless of what you're interested in, you can attach that to agriculture.
Absolutely.
Whether you're a chemist or an engineer or a political scientist, it doesn't matter. All of that requires people with the skills and knowledge. So it's how do we have a discussion that shows people there are no limits. And it's really about our creativity and what are the resources that we have to work with, and how do we make sure that as we do the work, we continue to bring people along with us. Because, you talked about No More X earlier, and I thought, wow, how many cooperatives have I been a part of? And, and there are reasons why those institutions, and we have to recognize that they were institutions. Sometimes we describe things just in passing, but they really played a key role in the development of the African American community in the Near East Side. So how do we recognize that we have to make all of these issues, our activities, sustainable? And so it is about bringing other people along. It is about making sure we have appropriate resources, whether they're financial or other institutional. It's about collaboration and relationships and partners, because if we really are serious about making a difference, we have to build to last.
Yes, I feel like the communal part of that is key, because the knowledge is there, but it's creating the space or creating the container to be able to share that knowledge, right? To create those spaces, sharing those resources, whether they're financial or actually tangible resources. Right. Yeah, the community building is definitely first.
We have a question from social media.
Yay.
We got watchers right now.
Okay.
And they have questions.
I like it.
Watchers.
This one comes from Kate Curry D'Souza. How can we support black farmers more? Is there a way for city leadership to support home gardens and unused spaces like schools for growing?
let me take black farmers, and then
Okay.
it could be okay. I talked about programs before. One of the things is people grow for commercial reasons for profit. And I know the ComFest works on a non-profit, non-competition model, but and I appreciate that. But we have certain process. For instance, right now we have a commitment from Ohio State to purchase 40% of its products from local sources. We have what's called a farm to school policy, where produce is to be. So how do we integrate African American farmers into these processes? Do people know about them? Very often they are producing at lower levels, so how do we aggregate so everybody benefits, et cetera. So maybe Yolanda, the community gardens.
It's funny because for me, it goes back to my TED Talk and talking about how with the integration of agriculture into school systems, I think that the pairing of that is being able to literally have an on-site garden at that school. If it is part of the classroom and part of the projects, I mean, they're building everything else for these schools. Right. I mean, even we in Pickerington just had a huge levy to build a new football stadium, and I said, y'all could put that money toward a community garden. Right. A fraction, a very small fraction
very
of that, just
fraction.
to be able to not only create this space for these students, because we have a number of students who are coming forward who are very interested into this work because they want that connection. They want to know where their food's coming from, and they understand the sustainability aspect of what it looks like to be able to grow your own and shortening that distance, their carbon footprints, all of those things. But just very simple, being able to have that on site at the schools, and it not being this space of schools like Pickerington. I'll be honest, because I understand that that's a space that has privilege and that has a different tax structure, but it doesn't have to be only those spaces, because I'm a product of Columbus City Schools, and I've been at those schools and I've seen, many of them have fields.
Yeah.
And that go unused, and it, again, growing gardens and not lawns. You can definitely lessen the cost of that lawn care if you have a community garden at that school.
And very quickly,
easily.
for me as well, it's moving from welfare to self-development. Okay? So rather than waiting or going to the pantry to be given something, you actually grow your own produce. And so the students actually learn how to provide for themselves, as opposed, and so, and really there's so many issues with the, anyway, there's so many issues. And if we can encourage schools, and there is someone within the city school system who is responsible for encouraging the growth of community gardens, but it's someone. She needs a team, she needs more resources, and the schools themselves need to be encouraged to utilize her services as well as the community resources around that particular school. And so it's a network.
Yes.
But first of all, there's to be a policy, and then a commitment, and then the people.
Yes, just because the level of empowerment to have that control, I think, is amazing for these students. Who might not feel like they have autonomy in a lot of things. They feel often acted upon, right? And so to be able to be empowered to say, I had a seed, I put it in the ground, I grew something from myself. Like, just, it might seem small, but to know that they can grow something that they can eat, that they can sustain themselves.
Oh, yeah.
I think that as small of a step as that is, can be the gateway to empowering these students to do even greater things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I just, again, to share briefly, I was working with a young group in the summer, and halfway through it, and they had planted flowers and vegetables, and so halfway through, I had announced that. When the course would end and how we were going to take care of the plants and all the, everything. And I remember this, this wonderful little person comes up to me, and she was about 5 or 6 years old, and you could see she was starting to tear. And I'm like, what did I say now? And she's just, and I'm like, okay, and, these little tables, the ones that just like your knees ache when you're sitting there, but, I want to be at their eye level, but, and she's just like, I'm like, well, what's the problem? Well, you said that we would take the plants won't be going home until, and I'm like, yes. And she said, but my family, they said we're going on vacation. I'm like, it's okay, but my plant will die without me if I'm not here. My plant will die. And I'm like, no. I said, when you leave to go on vacation with your family, you may take your plants home with you. The tears stopped like that. The smile came up, and she was ready to go on with her day. And I said, look at that. Just look at that.
Yeah. You don't want to get your kid a pet, get them a plant. Listen, they have something to take care of. It teaches them responsibility, and you can eat it.
I'm going to watch you around my pets.
Wow. Thank you. I could have listened to a lot more of this. This has been good. I know it's a smaller crowd than you might be used to when you two are speaking. You handled it really well. We have a special surprise, but before we get to that, I want to make sure that I apologize for not asking about your shirt.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay, this is the chief cultivator right here. Okay?
Thanks.
Chief cultivator of Forage in Black Apparel Company.
Yes.
Go check her stuff out.
Thank you.
I'm going to get one of those shirts.
And the dual plug for the Brownsville Growers Market starts July 1st, every Thursday, 3 to 6 p.m.
Look at that. There you go. Hey, full stop.
Got it in.
Full stop, yes.
All right, now, Dr. Julialynne. I want to introduce Candy.
We know each other.
Introduced to some, known to others.
To everybody else.
Right. Julialynne, it is my great pleasure to let everyone know that you are the honored community activist for the Community Festival this year. And it's such a great pleasure. You build bridges that other people don't even see the needs for. You build bridges with horticulture and with growing, and you build multicultural bridges that are so important in our community. And in this day and age, things are changing so fast in our community. We have to hang on to the roots and the history, and it's a good way to do it, is to teach by hands-on, just teach people. I'm honored to call you my friend. And thank you so much for being a part of ComFest. Thank you.
Thank you.
And where's our MC? And where's our MC? Come on, here he comes running. It's a ComFest moment.
Thank you, Candy. Sorry, I was just checking the schedule. We are running slightly ahead, which gives me a little bit of time to tell all of you. ComFest shirts, normally you have to volunteer. This year, you can just go to comfest.com and buy one. We would love it if you did that. You can buy mugs. You can buy all kinds of great merch, just as if you were at the street fair, just going right up to our tent, except now you can get one of these cool shirts. So please go out. Please do that. Also, you've probably heard me say it 1,000 times, donate.comfest.com. If you don't feel you want any merch, you can certainly just give us a little bit of money. We will put it to good use and put on a killer party next year for you. We thank you so much for coming out. We thank all of you. Any last words for us? Where can we go to see? I saw your site. I saw you scrolling through. It looked pretty cool, but I didn't actually get the site itself.
No, it's all good.
So tell me where I can go to see more of your info.
So forageinblack.com. Very easy.
Oh, wow, it was super easy.
Yeah.
Brownsville Growers Market, all one word, .com.
.com. All right. Any last words? Something to maybe inspire people if they only had 30 seconds to hear you. What can you give them to inspire them to come see you, come just maybe learn a little bit, do something? What got you inspired? I know. All right, doctor, you think? All All right, how about this? I'll tell you one thing. When you two were talking about, when we had the question come in, and you were talking about growing at schools. My daughters go to a daycare, a private little daycare, and they have 2 acres in the back. And they have these raised garden beds, and they start them in the spring, have them go out, rip the weeds out, till the dirt. They have the little kids, 2.5 years old, put the seeds in the ground.
Yes.
They have them come out and water it. They have them tend to it. They have them pick it, and then they sold us. They go, yeah, we've got 100% organic, not pesticide-free stuff that we feed your children. I found out that they had the kids doing all the work.
They did it themselves.
But that's all right.
labor.
But I was
Sorry.
actually super excited about it because
Yeah.
I love to garden. It's I work in a sales job, and so I have a desk. And at the end of the day, my desk is all tidy. And I worked all day, but it doesn't look like I did anything. And then I go out to my garden, and every day I see that constant change and the work I put into it, and and that stuff really excites me. And so, yeah, sure, I felt a little jaded when I was like, wait a second, I'm paying you to have my kids grow the food you're having me pay you to feed them, right? But they're teaching them some life lessons that are so invaluable.
Absolutely.
that they're going to have that respect for the food, and they're going to know where it comes from.
Yes.
And those are really cool things. So you guys really kind of hit that home for me when I was sitting there going, I know I made the right decision.
Let me do one thing quickly, just to reinforce for us. One of our slogans, taglines, the advertising people, you can tell me, but we say, from Carl Brown to Brownsville Growers Market. And we say that to reinforce for people that we've not always been a food desert.
Okay.
Right.
That we had institutions that provided for us as a community, and we can go back to that again. Absolutely. So we really want to bring in the history of the area and say, yes, we're here, but we represent a tradition.
Yeah.
And we hope that you acknowledge that. So I'll end that from Carl Brown to Brownsville Growers Market.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Summed it right on up. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.